Man, I thought the last show sounded really good. I think it went well.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it was really nice having Christian on and Will the show before that.
Yeah, yeah, they both brought a lot of personality. It was kind of nice to like ask a question and then just sit back for 5 minutes while they talked.
Yeah, they both had great answers. They could both talk, couldn't they?
Oh yeah, yeah. The audio quality all around was good. Christian's audio sounded great.
Yeah, it did. When I was editing it in Logic, I was a little resentful that his audio quality sounded better than mine, and I'm doing this full time.
You gotta upgrade.
I know, I do. The last two shows also. I'm not sure. You're probably online at the time. I told both Christian and Will at certain points, like, make sure your audio in your ears is turned right down because your microphone will probably pick it up.
Uh-huh.
And in both cases, I was at fault. Not not for the whole show, but I did certainly have my microphone picking up my audio coming back to me at certain points.
That's hard to balance, and it's not something you can really check in real time. So it's definitely tricky.
Yeah, exactly.
I know listening back to my recording with Will, I even had I was picking you guys up as well.
Yeah, you did it a few times. And those guys did as well, every now and then. Yeah. But it's really tricky. I mean, at some points I've got your audio so low in my ears I can hardly hear it using AirPods. So to get it any better, I would have to go to some sort of closed, headphone cup system.
Yeah, I think that's probably what would be the next step for me, because I am using some on-ear headphones at the moment, and I'm sure that those are not helping with sound isolation, and some good like studio like over-ear cups would probably be way better for what we're doing.
Yeah, it's probably worth it.
Yeah. So I've been really liking these. The headphones I'm using are some Bowers and Wilkins headphones that I actually picked them up at an Apple store like 10 years ago. Apple had them on display like for demoing the iPods. They had some really high-end headphones as well for you to like listen to the music, and they had these Bowers and Wilkins ones out, and they sounded incredible, so I bought some back then. They've just sat in the closet for years until we'd started podcasting, and I decided to bring them out for this.
Okay. The only decent ones I've got here are an open air or whatever you call them. So
the
I try
ones
not to use them.
Yeah, the ones with like the open backs. They kind of bleed audio
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they're going to be even worse than a set of AirPods.
Yeah. Maybe even some like just good like those in-ear ones that kind of create a suction. Those might be better, but I find them really uncomfortable.
I find them uncomfortable to get in, and I'm always scared that they'll get stuck in my ear, which actually did happen once.
Really?
Yeah, not stuck badly, like trip to the hospital stuck, but once one of the little cups came off, the flange came off the tip, and I kind of had to fish around for a little bit to get it out. I don't know, I've got like a phobia of getting things stuck in my ears after that.
Man, I have a phobia of like earwigs or some kind of insect crawling in my ear while I sleep. That's the thing I'm scared of.
Ugh. Earwigs are, yeah. I'm not sure I've ever seen an earwig.
Well, usually it's
are they native to North America?
I guess so, which is funny because usually you guys have this scary animals. Yeah, like they'll crawl in your ear while you sleep, and you honestly probably won't notice them initially. You'll just kind of feel like a slight pressure in your ear, like maybe it needs to pop, and then you'll like throughout the course of the day hear like scratching in your ear, and that's like the earwig trying to burrow deeper. And it's like usually like you can't flush it out with water. It's like almost always a trip to the hospital to get an earwig out.
Thank you for the new phobia.
Well, if you hadn't heard of them, maybe they're not really something you have to worry about in Australia.
I've certainly heard of the animal, the earwig. I've never heard of them crawling into people's ears at night.
Oh. So I mean, it's not like a common
thing I'm doing after this show.
You need some like nice like earplugs you can put in your ears while you sleep. But then you might be scared those will get stuck.
Yeah. And also that I'll forget, there's a baby close by crying, looking for its dad.
Yeah, that's true too.
I thought I'd give a little intro as to what we do on this show. Thought we might have potentially picked up a few listeners in the last few shows. So I think we do. So we don't normally do interview shows. We actually take the top 5 posts from the Apple subreddit of the last couple of weeks, or since we ever did a show last. But a little bit liberal when I say the top 5 posts. Say for an example, in this case, we just had the October event. So I'm basically picking up the posts from the subreddit that are related to the event. And yeah, we take those. It's always 5 posts. And we'll discuss those. Shall we start with the order that... Not actually... This wasn't the order that they were in the keynote. It's the order that they were on the subreddit. And the first one is the new Mac Mini. And so finally, after, 1,400 days, we got an updated Mac Mini.
Yeah, it was very close to 4 years.
Wow, that's a long time. And, I mean, I have to say, I was expecting a little bit more a little bit more to have changed. But it's not necessarily a bad thing that not much has changed. So the Mac Mini was updated in, 2013, then 2014. Mm-hmm. Whenever the last update was. The last update was certainly 2014.
Yeah.
They took away a couple of things that made the Mac Mini quite appealing. And one of those is the upgradable RAM slots. And the other option was the high-end processors, so there's no more i7. And we actually got both of those back.
Yeah, and I've seen a little bit of conflicting reports online. It's definitely like user upgradable RAM, but apparently it's extremely difficult to get to. Like, it's not like you take the foot off and the RAM is the first thing. There's like other components you're going to have to remove before you can get to the RAM. So it's a step in the right direction, but they've definitely still made it more complicated than it needs to be.
Oh, that's interesting, because I was looking at those little, they do the inside shots, the little teardowns. Mm-hmm. It looked like the SODIMMs were exposed as soon as you took the foot off. Maybe the report that I read had actually mixed up screenshots of the 2014 somehow.
Well, it was a little misleading, the way that Apple was marketing it, because for most of the presentation, they did show it opened up, and the RAM was right there when you opened it up. But I think like towards the very end of their segment on the Mac Mini, they showed like the whole thing closing itself up like an animation. And the first thing that happened was like a bunch of components like the cooling system went in on top of the RAM, and then the door closed on top of that. So it's not quite as easy to access as it could be, but it's still an upgrade over a soldered in RAM that we've had for the last 4 years.
Right. At least it's not on the level of like an iPhone 4 screen replacement.
Oh, man. Those were the worst. Did you ever do screen replacements back then?
Not back then when the iPhone 4 was worth some money, but some years later, I thought, maybe I should try this out, just see if I can actually do this. Yeah. And my God, I mean, you start off with like a decent-sized table, and by the time you get to the screen, the entire thing is laid out with tiny screws.
Yeah. So every iPhone before and after, you've been able just to like take the screen off, and that's the first component that comes out if you want to get into an iPhone. And with the iPhone 4's design, you had to take the back off and then take every single component out of the phone before the screen would come off, which is like the number one part that you'd want to replace, because those probably get broken the most, and it was a nightmare to fix.
So besides the upgradable RAM, the Mac Mini is actually getting desktop class processors, as opposed to I think it's was it 15 watt processors on the last one? Or basically they were laptop level processors.
Yeah.
And looking at the benchmarks that it's putting out, at least on the single core score, the Mac Mini can actually spec faster than any other Mac, including the iMac Pros, which is insane.
Single core, it's definitely doing extremely well. Of course, the number of cores is always something to take into consideration, but now we can even spec a Mac Mini up to 6 cores, which is way better than the 2 that we had before, and even 10 gigabit Ethernet for server purposes. But if you want now a fully spec'd out Mac Mini, you're looking at over $4,000 US, which is encroaching on iMac Pro territory.
It does kind of fall in line with Apple's comments in the last year that they're, refocusing on the Pro market. Well, here's step number 1. It's not a Mac Pro, it's a Mac Mini. You could basically put Pro at the end of it now, especially when you compare it against the specs of the previous one.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the comments in the post on the subreddit were in terms of pricing. This one from Segovius, he says the whole point of the Mini is that it was priced reasonably as an entry level, and this one isn't.
Yeah, the Mac Mini originally, and I think even up until this last one, you could get a Mac Mini for, $500? And now they're starting at $800, which I saw a report just earlier today that Apple across the board has raised the prices on all of their products by 20% this year, which is a little disappointing. I think the Mac Mini still has a good value offer, even coming in at $800. I think most people at this point are familiar with Mac OS and the Apple ecosystem, and so Apple doesn't need to entice new buyers as much as they did. I don't know, what was it, 10 years ago the Mac Mini came out? More than 10 years ago, because the first one was a G4. I don't know, like 15 years ago when the first Mac Mini came out, and they were still trying to reestablish their brand after Steve Jobs had returned for a few years. That time is gone, and now they're hopefully refocusing their entire Mac lineup as powerhouse computers and not these little cheap entry-level ones that run outdated specs that were outdated when they came out 4 years ago.
Yeah, the Mac Mini definitely was one of those computers. I mean, in Australian dollars, it is starting at $700, I think, which, yeah, it would pick up anyone who was even considering switching from a PC to a Mac. I mean, you just look at that and go, it's almost just a 5-minute decision. I'll go try this out. It's not too much of an expenditure just to test out what Mac OS is like. But yeah, that market doesn't exist so much now. And that's a $500 price bump, in Australian at least, to the new entry level. But saying that, the internals have gone from like a laptop level to a desktop level internals. So at least in part, it's warranted, the price bump.
Yeah, I agree that. Yeah, like I said, I think there's still a good value offer here. I'm actually considering picking one up myself if they release a really nice new Apple display, which they said they were going to do next year. It would go well together. Maybe use that in my recording booth instead of a MacBook Pro.
Did you see in the little pamphlets that come along with the Mac Mini, there is a little diagram of a Mac Mini hooked up to a display, like an Apple-looking display that doesn't match anything that they've previously sold? I
did see that. I don't know if that's just their representation of just like a minimal display, or if that's potentially alluding to a new Thunderbolt potentially display they're working on. I mean, I know they are working on one that was confirmed over a year ago now that they're going to release a new display with their modular Mac Pro that's coming next year. So that's the keynote I'm really excited to hear.
Yeah, I think, do you reckon that will be a WWDC release? I would say so, since it's going to be very, it's very much looked forward to by developers, this new Mac Pro.
Yeah, I don't know. They've kind of shifted WWDC to be almost entirely software focused now, but man, that used to be where they launched big products. WWDC and Macworld, that's when you knew the big things were coming. That'd be cool. I'd really be excited to see it earlier in the year. I really am not expecting to see it probably till the end of 2019. But yeah, WWDC launch would be awesome.
let's split the Macs that were announced at the keynote and talk about their new iPad Pro.
All right.
So the post was Apple's new iPad Pro has Face ID, USB-C, and slimmer bezels than ever before. I think I might have been a strong advocate for USB-C coming to the new iPad Pro. So I had a huge smile on my face when that was announced during the keynote.
I was very surprised. Didn't expect it. Yeah. So from what I've seen from early reviews, it sounds like anything that can plug into USB-C will work, short of external storage and printers. You can't plug a printer in. But yeah, other than that, cameras and I guess there's probably no USB-C mice out there. But if there are, you can't plug a mouse in. Yeah, I have the last generation iPad Pro, and I don't even get much use out of it anymore. It just kind of sits around. But even still, this is extremely tempting, just from the entire new design language they've kind of introduced here with the new iPad Pro, which I'm hoping they extend to iPhone potentially next year. And then the just insane speed improvements. I mean, the new iPad Pro is faster than quite a few of the MacBook Pros Apple is selling right now.
Including the i7 models.
Yeah, at least according to benchmarks. So, and something to keep in mind, looking at this, before iOS 12 was announced, there had been rumors a few months earlier that they had stripped back like all the big feature improvements they were planning to introduce in iOS 12 in favor of iOS 12 being a heavy performance update, which has pretty much been all but confirmed to be true. And this iPad was in development at the same time iOS 12 was. So really, this iPad was designed around the features we're going to see in iOS 13. And I think we could potentially see a lot more desktop class features in iOS come next year based on what we're getting hardware-wise.
Do you have any ideas about what those might be?
Oh, man. If in a perfect world, if I got exactly what I wanted, they would have some kind of almost like a dual boot into Mac OS option for the iPad Pro.
Keep dreaming.
But I think we are going to see the lines blurred a lot more in the next year between their Mac OS and iOS. And this isn't a ton to go off of, and it's not any more information, but I think _Insider tweeted yesterday or the day before that iOS 13 is going to be a complete game changer for iPad. And that's all he said. So,
and he's just going off a gut feeling, I guess, rather than inside information. I know he does get, he's really good at pulling apart iOS releases and betas and discovering things, but
yeah,
it's a long way out from iOS 13 for him to have any real information.
Yeah, unless there's some kind of there could be some features that were intended for iOS 12 that were just not entirely stripped from the OS, but just like turned off that you could potentially find. And that might be underestimating Apple, but he's impressed me in the past.
Yeah, he sure has. That's Guillaume Rambo, isn't it? _Inside.
Oh yeah, I don't even try to pronounce his name.
I'm like you. I would be very excited to use the new iPad as my computer, replacing a MacBook Pro. Yeah. But I think iOS is just far too hamstrung to even consider it. I mean, something like recording this podcast, I'm not sure that would be doable on iOS.
Like just recording audio, or what exactly do you think would be the hang-up?
Well, recording my input, listening to it back on an output, and then also sending that input audio through to you at the same time.
Oh, I see, yeah. I was going to say, you could definitely record audio, But yeah, the idea of needing to record audio while also talking through a chat application.
Yeah, see, it takes
You're
like
probably
2
right.
seconds to think of a reason why an iPad can't be a main computer. I would say for most people, it doesn't take long.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe if we see something like even just windowed applications on the iPad Pro where we can have multiple apps running at once, that might resolve a lot of the issues.
And there are some really basic things. I mean, going back, it's almost a year now when I really put an effort into making an iPad Pro my main computer.
Mm-hmm.
A basic thing like hitting Alt-Tab on the smart keyboard, going to another app, which to start with is dead slow compared to doing it on macOS, but then your keyboard input's just not working until you like close the app and went back in. Basic stuff like that makes me not want to try this until at least iOS 13.
You had problems with your input not being recognized?
Yeah, and this is quite a common problem. You could find it, searching Reddit or whatever.
Huh.
But yeah, Alt-tabbing on the smart keyboard, and then you would just lose your input until you either Alt-tabbed out, or you wouldn't lose your input, you just wouldn't be able to do any text input. But you could Alt-tab back to the other app and then back in again, or home button and back into the app.
I guess I didn't do much Alt-tabbing, so I didn't notice.
Okay. It does sound like I'm nitpicking, but when the basics like that don't work, I find it very hard to believe that I could make an iPad my main computer.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone who works like in software like me, it's just not even an option because the main thing I need of my portable computer is to be able to like either remote into my work system, which is not something I prefer to do, or be able to actually download locally the code I'm working on and not only edit it, but run it in a local environment. And I don't think that's something I'm ever going to be able to do on an iPad. So,
how about the new Apple Pencil? That's had a few little updates.
Yeah.
It now has a little tappy on the front. I couldn't work out, is that just a little like a tappy sensor like the AirPods have, or is there some sort of button there?
So I'm not sure how people came to this conclusion, but it sounds like there's like a pretty sophisticated touch sensor in the Apple Pencil. And I think it's actually from looking at software itself, because it looks like the Apple Pencil also has the ability to support like a slide gesture. If you slide your finger up and down the pencil, it has the ability to recognize that input. It's not being used anywhere, and it's not something developers can access, but it was like in an early version of the SDK or something, and now it's gone. So either a hardware feature that ended up not working well or something that they're still waiting to announce once they have a good use for it. I don't know.
That would be really cool. And it also charges just by connecting to the side of the iPad. So there's no more taking the cap off to charge it and firstly creating like this little iPad Apple Pencil weapon, but also losing the cap like 2 seconds after you've taken it off the end of the pencil.
Yeah, they really solved pretty much every complaint people had with the first generation Apple Pencil. Not only are you able to charge it wirelessly, but also you have somewhere to store it when you're not using it, which is a big deal on its own. Because I know with my iPad Pro, half the time I don't know where the pencil is, and the other half of the time when I do find it, it's dead once I find it. So it being stored and charged at the same time is great.
What uses at the moment do you have for your Apple Pencil? I know you don't use your iPad much.
I have almost no use for the Apple Pencil. I try to, like, if I'm taking notes for something, I'll try to use the iPad Pro. I use an app called Notability. Just because...
Great app.
Yeah, it's a great app. And I use it to organize my notes. And they have the ability to search through your notes, like through your handwriting for text, which is great. If I'm trying to look up something I took notes on forever ago. But other than that, I have no reason. I've tried to justify an Apple Pencil by like getting art and creativity apps, but I'm not really an artist at all. So I end up drawing a couple stick figures and then closing the app and going back to note taking.
I think that the Apple Pencil iPad combo it inspires a lot of people to try their hand at art. But yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I can't even draw a stick figure that looks half decent.
So yeah, that's kind of I don't know. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff when it comes to technology. It's like, man, if I just buy Final Cut Pro, I'll be so good at making movies because I'll have all the tools. But it takes more than money to be good at that creative stuff.
I can tell you, when I moved from iMovie to Final Cut Pro, my YouTube videos got no better.
Yeah, not only that, but it took me there was a significant learning curve going from iMovie to Final Cut Pro that for a while, even to crank out the same quality of video, it took me twice as long to make it.
And the other announcement alongside the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil was the new keyboard cover. So it's not so much an origami project anymore to set it up. But the downside is that when you do have the keyboard cover behind the iPad, you are actually feeling the keys. Smart enough, of course, to not action any of the keys when you press them. But the keys are facing out. So it's not the nicest thing to hold in your hand, I guess, if you got the keyboard cover on it. But at the same time, you can just easily yank the iPad off the cover if you intend to just to hand hold it.
Which is what I normally do with my smart cover at the moment. If I'm not using the keyboard, I just take it off because I don't like it being thicker or it flopping around behind the iPad. Now, an idea that I've had since this first smart cover came out a few years ago, if Apple allowed developers to still access the input of a smart cover that's flipped back, imagine holding an iPad on its sides and your fingers are resting on a couple keys on the back, and you could use 3 keys on each hand to control games or something while you're playing.
Oh, that sounds really good.
Yeah, I always thought they should implement something like that so you can have some physical controls while holding an iPad, but I don't know how realistic that is.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to make it somehow easy to identify what keys you're touching, a little nubbin, like the ones you get on the F and the J keys.
Yeah.
Have you seen the controllers you can get at the moment, which are attached to the sides of the iPad? I'm just trying to think of the name of it, but you kind of sandwich the iPad on the sides between these two. Imagine if you split a regular controller in half and then put one on each side of the iPad.
I've seen stuff like that for the iPhone. I think I've ever seen it for the iPad, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I just remember the name. It's GameVice.
GameVice.
Yeah, you get them for the iPhone and the iPad. It looks a little bit ridiculous on an iPad, especially if it was a 12-inch.
Yeah.
But there you go. You've got a switch. Speaking of a switch, your iPad Pro can now charge your Switch if you want through USB-C.
Yeah, or a MacBook Pro or anything else.
Yeah, I was wondering which way the juice would flow if you charged an iPad into a MacBook.
So the way it works is the same way a MacBook works, because a MacBook has the ability to either take charge or charge things over its USB-C ports. So it's whatever end the cable's plugged into first is the device that will be delivering power. So if you plug the wire into your iPad and then your Mac, the iPad will charge your Mac. But if you plug it into your Mac first, the Mac will charge your iPad. But yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, maybe I can't imagine cases like traveling or something where I'd want to use my iPad to charge things. But usually I feel like my iPad's the battery that I have to worry about keeping topped up. Because if I'm on the go somewhere, I'm primarily using the iPad. My phone stays in my pocket because I have no reason to use both devices at once.
So when you were just saying that then, I thought you were talking about the MacBook and the iPad. So you're saying that, were you talking about an iPhone charging an iPad? No, you weren't, were you?
No. An iPad charging a MacBook. Okay. But I'm saying I couldn't think of many cases where I'd want an iPad to charge something like my phone. Because if I have my iPad with me, it's what I'm going to use, and it'll be the thing that dies first. Yeah, if I have my iPad, it's because I'm somewhere where it won't be too inconvenient to use it, like on a long trip or I don't know.
Right, okay.
And in that case, I have no reason to like switch back and forth between my iPad and my phone because the iPad, all my text messages and calls are forwarded to the iPad. So it'll be the thing that goes first. If I have it, it will die before anything else I have.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've got you now. Should we push on to the MacBook Air, which was also announced?
Oh man, this whole thing confuses me.
You've got some thoughts on this, don't you?
I mean, I never would have guessed in a million years that they were going to release another thing under the MacBook Air name. And to me, it seems like this is a 100% marketing move because the MacBook Air itself is like the number one selling Mac, like not the number one laptop, just like across their desktop and laptop platform. The MacBook Air sells the most. And I guess to some extent people don't want a new MacBook that's better than the MacBook Air in every way and the same price if they could ever match that. They want another MacBook Air. So here we are with a MacBook Air with 13 inches, with a Retina display and a fast processor that's, a few $100s more than the old starting price of the MacBook Air. But then you have the MacBook, which is smaller and slower than the MacBook Air, but costs more than the MacBook Air. And then if you want like the fastest, highest end MacBook Air you can get, then you're in the same price category as a 13-inch MacBook Pro, which why wouldn't you upgrade to that for, I think it's a $100 jump to go from the spec'd out MacBook Air to a MacBook Pro. So I just don't understand why this MacBook Air exists along with the other computers in their lineup anymore.
I should have read the post title as well because it's a self-post by Unstable Parallel, and the title is "There's no reason for the MacBook to exist with the new MacBook Air."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why anyone would ever choose the MacBook over the MacBook Air unless just being a little bit thinner and lighter is really, really important. Because the MacBook Air is so much faster, and you get a slightly bigger display out of it. And you get the new trackpad. Does the MacBook have a Force-Touch trackpad? I bet it does.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Yeah, I don't understand their computer lineup. They need to straighten this out.
Yeah, there are basically 4 levels of MacBooks at the moment, I think you'd say. The Retina MacBook, MacBook Air, MacBook Pro non-touch bar, then MacBook Pro with touch bar.
And they're still selling the old model of the MacBook Air as well.
Yeah. To bring this back to some sort of sanity, what I hope they do. Well, here's my guess, all right?
Okay.
So the MacBook Air, the new one they've just announced, is replacing the Retina MacBook. So because that also didn't get an update this year from memory, maybe early in the year.
Yeah,
certainly not recently.
So. Yeah.
So the MacBook Air replaces that, and the MacBook Air is also replacing the MacBook Pro without a touch bar, because they both don't have touch bars. MacBook Air has a 7-watt CPU, and the MacBook Pro non-touch bar has 15, I think. Mm-hmm. It's certainly not like the higher end MacBook Pros.
Mm-hmm.
So MacBook Air replaces those 2 laptops. They don't get updates going forward, and we're left just with what we used to have, I guess, a couple of years ago, which is MacBook Air and MacBook Pro, both with very distinguishable performance points and also very distinguishable physical characteristics, one being a wedge, one being flat, one having a touch bar, which, love it or hate it, it does look like a professional feature if you just walk into an Apple store and you see it on the bench.
So, honestly, in my mind, there's only one thing they have to do to get their entire computer lineup back to some form of normal, at least to me. They just need to switch the name of the MacBook and MacBook Air. because here, stick with me. Because then we're back to the exact same laptop lineup we had in 2008 when the first MacBook Air was announced. We had the MacBook, which at that point was the plastic, consumer end computer, and it was the cheapest computer. And then we had the MacBook Pro, which was their all-aluminum professional one. And then Steve Jobs announced the MacBook Air, which was thinner and lighter than the MacBook with less performance, but it cost more than the MacBook because you're paying for have this, the thinnest laptop in the world at that point, but now just, a thinner laptop. And if they were to switch the two names, we'd be back to that exactly. The MacBook would be the MacBook Air, which you're just paying a little extra, even though it's has worse performance. You're paying a little extra because it's so incredibly thin and light. And then the MacBook Air would be the MacBook, which is just their cheapest entry computer.
So the only thing that's missing in that case for Apple is that marketing-wise, they're probably going to sell more MacBooks, and the MacBook Air loses its, the aura surrounding how great it is.
I mean, that clearly didn't happen in 2008 when, even though it cost more and performed less, it has now become the best-selling Mac. I guess that first MacBook Air, a lot of people critiqued, and it was really that second generation of the MacBook Air that we really saw its true potential. But I think if we consider like this a restart from that point, and we say like the MacBook is this entry to the MacBook Air market of what computers are going to be one day, then the MacBook Air, which is the current MacBook, would eventually reach the processing prowess of the MacBook Airs we're seeing now. I'm losing myself trying to describe this, but
yep.
But yeah, not that it makes sense, but I don't know. Air is supposed to mean thin and light. That's what it's always meant in their marketing. And to have the Air, a brand new Air, be thicker and heavier than the standard MacBook just doesn't make sense to me. Because what does Air mean now?
It's just the tag they've left on the end because everyone knows it, basically.
So, yeah. I don't know. So, but I think we'll probably see some kind of unification or cleanup of the Mac line in the next year. Especially with the new Mac Pro coming out, they're probably going to do a lot of reworking to their computer line.
Unless you throw something crazy like ARM processors into the mix, and then I'm not sure it will be cleaned up. I think we might have a few more years of mess.
Ooh, there you go. So if they give the MacBook an ARM processor, that would completely justify the existence of the MacBook. It's an incredibly thin and light, and it can be that because it has a super fast ARM processor that doesn't need all the cooling of a standard x86, and you're paying more because it's kind of this new foray into a whole new architecture for Apple, and it makes sense because, I don't know, it would make sense if they just made the MacBook something unique and new, and that's why it costs more even though it's smaller and less powerful. But right now, yeah, it makes no sense.
Imagine the Retina MacBook with an A12X, and it's actually faster than like a MacBook Pro with an i7.
So what if we do like conspiracy, and that is why Apple hasn't made ARM MacBooks yet, because it'll cannibalize the sales of their MacBook Pros.
Man, it would just destroy them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, of course you have the big hang-up of running x86 applications on an ARM MacBook. They have to have some kind of really powerful emulation layer, which is bound to slow down some of those performance gains you're going to get.
Rosetta 2.
Yeah. It could be done.
Was it Rosetta that was PowerPC to Intel?
Ah, man. All I can think of is running Windows applications on Linux, which you used Wine for. I don't remember what you used to go from PowerPC to Intel, though.
You can use Wine for Windows apps on your Mac as well.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does look like Rosetta was the name of the software.
Credit to my memory for once.
That was a long time ago.
One thing I was a little yeah, it was.
So
I always remember when you opened like a classic app using Rosetta, I guess you would get like the old school cursors as well.
Yeah.
It always looked really good. One thing that kind of surprised me was that the new MacBook Air got Touch ID instead of Face ID. I was kind of expecting, Face ID is not that new anymore. We're already a good year into it. I didn't think anything new would be released with Touch ID, but here we go.
Yeah.
So it's just like the power button placement has been swapped for Touch ID. There's no touch bar, of course. It's just that one fingerprint sensor.
I was definitely in the same boat. It's surprising to me that I think a computer makes perfect sense for Face ID, because you always have the screen facing right at you, and it'll be kind of elevated. I don't know. I think it makes sense. I think that potentially we're seeing Touch ID in the MacBook Air, so that Face ID on the MacBook Pro next year seems more like a Pro feature.
Okay. So a bit of marketing distinguishing features as well, because it might look silly to have Touch ID, the old tech on a MacBook Pro, and Face ID on the MacBook.
Right.
Yeah, at the low cost. Maybe they just had like a whole stash of Touch ID sensors from like the iPhone 8, which didn't sell as well as they thought it would compared to the 10 with Face ID.
There you go.
What are we going to do with this like box? These 1,000 boxes of Touch ID sensors.
Just put them in a computer.
Yeah, why not?
Can make Touch ID dongles.
God.
Plug it into USB-C
Imagine
on
that.
your old computers, and then you can Touch ID into them.
Maybe one day we'll get like a clip-on Face ID sensor for old MacBooks with Touch ID. Like an old eyesight camera clipped onto the top of the screen.
Man, well, the way Christian was talking last week with the company he interned with, BioNim, and their ability to use your ECG for like identifying you and using that as like a secure password. I mean, that has to be the direction that Apple's going to go with it. And it'd be silly not to, because then you have like continuous authentication all the time. You don't have to scan your face or your fingerprint or anything.
Yeah, so the only roadblock to that is that to measure your ECG, you have to have like 2 contact points, so you'd actually have to like
True.
take an ECG reading.
Yeah.
You can't just be wearing a watch, although it could function something like it does at the moment, whereas you authenticate once on the watch, like say you put your passcode in, and then as long as it remains on your wrist, then you're still authenticated until the watch comes off your wrist.
Yeah. Although they could do that now. It's silly they don't. I guess they kind of do, because you open your Mac and your Apple Watch unlocks it. They need to extend that to the iPhone. That's what they need to do.
So you maybe the power button becomes one contact, and then gripping it around the edges is your other contact. Actually, no, it needs to be down 2 limbs, doesn't it? It needs to be a 2-handed process.
I just meant they need to extend, like they need to let your Apple Watch unlock your iPhone and keep it unlocked while it's in range.
The next 2 topics aren't to do with the keynote, so I just wanted to quickly say that we didn't get any new AirPods at the event, and we didn't see any AirPower, unfortunately.
Yeah, I did see, either it was just today or yesterday, that Apple's filed some new patents for some kind of Bluetooth technology that's hinting at potentially, AirPods is Bluetooth 5.0 in the near future. I doubt we'll see it by the end of the year, but maybe early next year.
I'll just quickly back a step. Did you see that the new MacBook Air doesn't actually have Bluetooth 5.0?
No, it doesn't?
No.
Well, that's silly.
They've cheaped out a little bit there.
All they had to do is put like the W2 or W3 chip in it, and they already make the silicon for it. Why wouldn't they just put their chip in there?
Hey, you have to differentiate, The marketing team is keeping a close eye on you, engineering.
That's just not... I was going to say, it's not a feature most people are going to notice, so why would you use that for marketing? But that makes perfect sense, because most people aren't going to notice, and the people that do care, that'll be a big deal to them. So, never mind.
Yeah. You explained that point perfectly. That wasn't being facetious, by the way. That was... Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Good job, Apple. That's the exact kind of features you should do that to, and not the stuff people care about all the time.
Yeah. So did you see this post that Apple is launching a vintage repair pilot program to fix aging iPhones, MacBooks, and more? So I think it's called a pilot program because to start with, they're they're going to be repairing iPhone 5s, MacBook Airs from 2012, and iMacs from 2011, but only in the US and Turkey. Puzzle that one out. I'm not really sure. And what they'll be adding to the list is an iPhone 4Ss and MacBook Pros from 2012. What do you think about this? Do you think it's some sort of like a what would you call it? Like a plan to counter the prevailing theory in the public that, you know, Apple has planned obsolescence built into their products, and so they're like, oh, maybe if we say we're going to fix all these old products, then, you know, that image is you know, a little cut's taken out of it.
I mean, I feel like that has to be at least part of it. And even if it's less of an image thing, I'm trying to remember her name. Last year, Apple had whatever their head of recycling or whatever come on stage and talk about all their efforts they're making to not only recycle the products that aren't used anymore, but make sure the products that people have last longer, as kind of a green initiative. And this might just be us seeing the extension of this initiative. They've been working. I mean, they've always tried to be an extremely green company. This could be an extension of that. I know I was disappointed when I saw vintage repair program that I can't bring like my original Macintosh in, but
yeah, the skeptic in me though kind of reads vintage repair program and then thinks, how much repairing are they really going to be doing to like an iPhone 4S? Because even when the 4S was covered, most of the time they're not actually repairing anything. They're just giving you like a refurbished iPhone 4S.
Do you think that's what they're going to do with this? They still have old 4Ss in stock, and that's why they're doing this?
I imagine so. Because if they didn't have the capabilities before to do these repairs, then they're not going to have them now.
Well, I don't think it was so much that they didn't have the capability. It was like a speed and convenience thing. Because my understanding with most of these trade-ins, even today, is that if you bring a device in that needs to be repaired, the Apple Store will give you a new one, so you're happy and on your way, and then they'll ship your broken device, you know, to whatever repair center they have, which will then fix it and then repackage as a refurbished device.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, I'm sure there's people out there that need their iPhone 4S fixed still. But I mean, at that point, that's not planned obsolescence. You just need to upgrade. It's been 7 years.
You know, I'm still running my iPhone 4 as my phone right now.
Oh, really?
I mean, if you haven't listened to any previous shows, you're probably not sure what I'm talking about. But yeah, so my iPhone 10 went to my partner, and I just got an iPhone 4 out of the cupboard while I decided what to do. And it's been, how long has it been since the 10s came out? I still haven't decided what I'm doing, so I'm still using that iPhone 4 as my daily.
What are you okay, I guess first of all, how's the iPhone 4 holding up for you?
Oh, it's a brick, you know. If you drop the phone on the floor, you're more likely to have the floor break. No, I'm kidding. It's actually quite fragile, but it feels like a brick because it's so heavy.
Yeah.
You know, solid glass and metal.
What version of iOS are you running on it?
It's got iOS 7, which I think is the latest for the 4.
Yeah, I think so.
And the main annoyances, I would say, is there's no text message forwarding and there's no Apple Music.
Is it reasonably fast, or is it unbearable to use?
It's not unbearable. You'd be surprised, yeah.
Huh.
It's not unbearable. Although my expectations were extremely low. And also, you're basically not going to run any third-party apps on it anymore.
Right.
Because even though the App Store does give you the option of downloading like the last compatible version, for instance, say the apps I have tried, Overcast, the podcast player, that version doesn't sync with the back-end syncing engine anymore because of some security reasons. Mm-hmm. Same thing for Instagram, doesn't log in anymore because of some security protocols that iOS 7 doesn't have. or that version of the app doesn't have. So even though it does give you these old versions of the apps, it's basically unusable.
And how's the battery?
Well, considering I don't really use it that much, the battery goes for days.
Yeah.
If I used it like I had been using my 10 though,
yeah,
I can't see it lasting too long.
I guess it's fitting. Like you couldn't use your Apple Watch anymore, so you smashed it.
You're saying I smashed it on purpose?
Yeah, everybody like it can't sync with the phone, so what do I need it for? I've got a great video, not great, kind of heartbreaking, but of me. You remember the disaster of the third generation iPad, like the A5X chip,
the disaster of its existence.
Yeah, just like the A5X chip underperforming and making the whole iPad feel like it drags, and then releasing the fourth generation iPad.
30-pin connector.
Yeah, and the fourth gen iPad came out like 6 months later and was infinitely better. The third generation iPad was the first iPad I ever bought.
Oh, really? Actually, you know what? I think I'm in the same boat. I think it was the first I ever bought too. Yep.
I was so frustrated. There's a video of me taking a sledgehammer, a mallet, to my iPad Pro, and like throwing it on the concrete and smashing it with a mallet.
Really?
Yeah.
That's worth looking up.
I'll have to find it and send it to you. Or it's like on my Facebook. So maybe I'll upload it to like a better sharing platform, and we can like put it in the show notes.
Absolutely. Yeah, you send me that link and it'll be in the show notes for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put that together. So, but anyway, I was very frustrated about that.
It wasn't like the day the iPad 4 came out, was it, that you smashed it? I hope you waited like a few years till it was not worth anything anymore.
No, it was pretty soon after the iPad 4 came out. So I would have been
okay.
It's towards the end of high school for me when that happened. So I don't know what I was thinking. Like it was like $800 was like my entire life savings at that point, and I don't know.
All right, yeah, please do share that.
Okay.
We've got one more topic, and it was submitted by Surrender Monkey 2017. Poor Siri, God bless your little heart. I thought I'd put this in there just because we haven't had a little talk about Siri for a while. So we'll keep it short and sweet, hey?
Yep.
But Surrender Monkey says, so he had his phone on the desk in front of me, the watch on my arm. Hey Siri, add half and half to my shopping list. Siri on the watch, here's your reminder, half and half. Siri on the phone, 1/2 and 1/2 equals 1. Thank you, my sweet retard. So, everyone's got a little Siri anecdote. So here's mine from during the week.
Okay.
I said to my HomePod, basically, because that's the only thing with decent Siri at the moment in my life. Siri, what time does the post office open? Siri replied, first option on Scarborough Beach Road opens at 9 a.m. Second option on Scarborough Beach Road opens at 8 a.m. So I was already angry at this point because it just gave me two options and didn't distinguish between them at all. So I went to my computer, found both post offices, and neither opened at 8 a.m.
Really?
So not only did it give me useless information, it gave me incorrect useless information.
Where was it pulling that from?
I'm not sure. I thought around here that it would have grabbed it from Yelp. So I jumped onto Yelp because as a good citizen, I always try and make a correction. But on Yelp, both post offices had opening times at 9 a.m. So I've got no idea where it got 8 a.m. from.
Does Apple Maps store that kind of information?
I didn't think it did.
I don't know.
I always thought it came from a third party. But yeah, that could be worth looking up then. Just on Apple Maps itself.
Well, I haven't got a chance to ask you this yet in the last couple months, and I've been meaning to, so this is kind of a good transition.
Oh, yeah?
Do you have you found any useful Siri shortcuts?
I'm the wrong person to be asking with an iPhone 4. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's true. But before you gave your phone away, did you have any you played with?
I actually basically gave the phone away when Siri shortcuts came out. That was basically when the XS came out. Yeah, no iPad, no decent iPhone. What am I even doing running an Apple podcast?
Are you have you kind of figured out what direction you're going to go with replacing the iPhone 4? Are you leaning towards a newer one or finding a used phone?
I've actually been thinking about this a lot recently. I'm thinking of running a little experiment wherein I don't have any iOS devices in my life for the rest of the year. So I've got basically to kind of... Well, I think I've brought this thing up quite a few times already, so I won't go on too long, but to try and like break the addiction of always having a phone in my hand, whether I'm at home or out and about, just because there's a little one that I'm raising up, and I don't want him to think that that's just the norm, even though it's what most people do, just to use their phones all the time.
Right.
So I'm thinking of going mobile deviceless for the next few months.
Oh, wow.
And having an iPhone 4 helps that, because I'm not tempted at all to use the thing. There have been a couple of roadblocks. Firstly, like WhatsApp, you kind of have to have a mobile device for that. But I've actually got an Android emulator running on my Mac for WhatsApp. Can you believe that's a thing?
Okay.
It works really well. BlueStacks, if anyone's interested in that. And the other hassle is Instagram, because they're very mobile first over at Instagram. But a combination of that same Android emulator and changing the user agent in desktop Safari kind of gets me around most of what I want for Instagram.
Oh, okay. I was just about to ask how you've been posting to Instagram.
Yeah. In Safari, just turn on that develop menu and then user agent, change it to iPhone or iPad, and you basically get all the features of mobile Instagram, of the app.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see how long this experiment lasts. But I'm aiming for, say, Christmas time. Maybe my Christmas present will be like a nice new iPhone to me. But until then, I'm not going to have any good discussion regarding Siri shortcuts. Sorry.
That's fine. I really haven't found anything useful for it yet. Anyway, the coolest thing to me is that you can have Siri like run SSH queries. So it can,
oh wow,
yeah, which is like really powerful. I'm working with a professor at the local university in town. He's got a program that he wants to run a lot faster, and so I'm parallelizing it and optimizing to run on the university's supercomputers. And I can just, like, while I'm running test cases and stuff, I can ask Siri. It's like, hey Siri, is the program done running yet? Oh, she just heard me. I said, is the program done running yet? and she, because these things take like many days to run, and so she can SSH into university supercomputer, check the status, and then report back whether or not the code is done running. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, that is powerful. That sort of stuff is what's going to make iOS like a real replacement for macOS. If that doesn't come to macOS, I think that sort of stuff will be what turns it into like a fully fledged operating system.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about it. That's about all. I've got some kind of lame stuff, like you can say cheese and she'll take a picture for you automatically, or
oh yeah.
Yeah. But she does it silently without opening the viewfinder or anything, so it's kind of like a spy thing, except you have to say cheese. So and there's kind of
really? It doesn't actually open the camera app?
Yeah, in the shortcut you can choose whether or not you want the viewfinder to come up when it takes a photo. So it just snaps a photo like silently in the background while it's running.
You could, well, my first thought is that you could make it something like a little bit less obvious than say cheese, and if at any point you are getting robbed, you could, like, say the code word, and it would take the photo of your attacker and upload it to iCloud Photos.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and call 000, whatever. That's part of the shortcut.
Yeah, I mean,
nice.
There's some really cool stuff that you can do in Siri shortcuts, but again, I'm not really creative enough to come up with anything too useful.
I just wanted to mention one more thing before we finish up. This is kind of one of the reasons why I included this topic. So I saw this really nice comment in the post about Siri messing up that person's half and half query. A user called Stoner Meditation left this comment. I know voice recognition and the results are still rudimentary, but I never thought they would have anything like this in my lifetime. In brackets, I'm old. I'm often amazed how helpful Siri is. So I think we do need to take a step back every now and then, even though we're complaining about Siri, and appreciate that we can actually do stuff like this, like Siri shortcuts, and that anything at all is understood that comes out of our mouths.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how quickly we take things like that for granted. When Siri was, unveiled in 2011, it was the most advanced voice recognition digital assistant, and it blew everyone away, even though she could only do a couple things back then. But even taking it more basic than that, like I remember the original iPhone keynote in 2007, and the whole audience like erupted into applause when Steve Jobs showed how you can scroll by flicking on the screen, and that blew everyone away. Like, that was applause worthy, 8 or 9 years ago, and now, like, the things that we complain about.
Yeah, now we complain if the scroll is less than 30 frames per second.
It has to be 120. Why isn't everything the same as the iPad yet?
One last thing to round up the show. I just wanted to mention in this same thread, two users, Imsky and Wuthering Bites, had a multi-day argument debating whether Master Chief was a cyborg or a human. Well worth looking up in that little thread on that topic. Just control Command F Master Chief.
Isn't he a human?
Read the thread. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
All right. I'm James VDM on Reddit and Twitter.
And I'm Jellyboot on Reddit and Twitter.
And if anyone wants to give us some love at Patreon, it's patreon.com/the Apple Show.